Welcome to the Health Committee. We have you here for 10 minutes. I will hand that time to you now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is William Rolleston, and I am the Chair of the Life Sciences Network. And as the Chair has already mentioned, with me is Mr. Nathan Mills, who is our Executive Director. The Life Sciences Network has represented the interests of science and industry in this area since 2000. We research and educate on matters related to the life sciences, and in particular, our aim is to improve scientific literacy and to hold those who misrepresent science to account. The Life Sciences Network supports this bill. Gene technology is revolutionising medicine. We now have the tools to address at the genetic level diseases such as cancer, inherited disorders, and autoimmune diseases. Agricultural biotechnology has made considerable strides since the Royal Commission in 2001. More than 16 million farmers in 26 countries collectively use GM crops on 200 million hectares of farmland. They do this because it's better for their environment, their families, and their businesses. Genetic modification in agriculture has led to decreased pesticide use and reduced CO2 emissions, all the while increasing production and farmer profits, and crucially, avoiding the destruction of wetlands, native vegetation, and rainforests, which would otherwise have been required to feed a growing population. Precision breeding using gene editing is accelerating the genetic gain in plants and animals. Precision breeding has been deregulated as countries realise it is more precise, more effective, and more efficient than radiation mutagenesis. Even Europe is climbing on board. Technically indistinguishable from conventional breeding, it is possible that we have already imported our first gene-edited cultivar. In 2016, 130 Nobel laureates wrote an open letter to governments around the world, urging them to do everything in their power to accelerate the access of farmers to all the tools of modern biology, especially genetic modification. They called opposition based on emotion and dogma, contradicted by data, a crime against humanity. Just last year, a similar number, including World Food Prize winners and the inventors of CRISPR, made a similar plea for countries to use biotechnology. What side of history do we want to be on? The Royal Commission advised that it was not realistic to consider either a GE-free nor a 100% organic future. We should proceed with caution. There has been a lot of caution in the last 20 years, but very little proceeding. However, it is not credible to claim that we are GE-free now. We use GM medicines, we eat GM food, we make our cheeses with GM enzymes, we feed our animals GM feed, and the EPA has approved 10 releases of GMOs into the environment. The Gene Technology Bill is modelled on legislation Australia has had in place for the last 20 years. They have done the hard work for us. According to the Australian Gene Technology Regulator, a key principle which underpins their regulatory success is their objective decision-making based on scientific criteria, and most importantly, leaving trade and the market access to industry. Other countries who use GM also trust their industries to manage coexistence. I asked the committee to investigate industry schemes like Australia's Market Choices Framework, Canada's stewardship schemes, or the internationally recognised Excellence Through Stewardship program in the USA. Government should not be looking to add more regulation and cost to farmers. Farmers do not need more inspectors marching across their land with tape measures and clipboards. But government can have a role, for example, through MPI advice services and providing its expertise, resources and coordination to develop similar industry-run stewardship programs here. Science provides us with tools and predictions to manage our future. Science is not the enemy. With a growing population and the environment under strain, the next 25 years will not only be important, it will be the most important 25 years in the history of agriculture. The recommendations you make whether, in the words of the Nobel laureates, you base those recommendations on emotion and dogma or on data. In other words, what evidence you consider credible will determine that future. Thank you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. We have a question. Hamish had one, Steve has one, Aisha, Cam, Minister.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, William, for your contribution. We've heard a lot of it. There's been the insinuation that coexistence can't happen. What's the Life Science Network's view on that?
Well, coexistence can happen, and as I say, look at the data. Those countries that, in fact, the five largest countries by land area for organics also use GMOs, and they don't have regulated coexistence schemes. They leave that up to the market to decide and to work out. And look, I would say that in the early days of GMOs, there were problems, but they've got those systems sorted out, and we can learn from them.
Thank you.
Dr. Vera.
Our country is a trading nation. You have made the strong point that trade considerations couldn't be in the bill. That is asking us to take a big risk with the source of income for our country. Why shouldn't trade considerations be included in the regulator's decision making?
Well, again, I asked you to look at the data. Those countries who put trade in and have regulated coexistence schemes are those countries that don't use GMOs. Look, for example, at countries in Europe. They have regulated coexistence.
With respect, that's not that you're not saying there that there's no risk to trade from the.
I've never said there's no risk to trade. What I'm saying is that if you look around the world and look at best practice, that's actually managed by industry. Those risks are managed by industry. I don't see why government should be putting in schemes that they're going to have to charge farmers levies for to manage those schemes, when actually industry is perfectly capable of managing those risks themselves. That's their business. That's what they do every day.
It's not what Fonterra told us.
I know that's not what Fonterra told you, but I would.
Biggest exporter.
Minister Patterson.
Sorry, I would point to Fonterra's submission, and I'd like to look at it carefully because they conflate, plants and animals. There is not a country in this world that restricts or makes you label products that come from animals that have eaten GMO. And if you look at Europe, they import 6 billion euros worth of GMO feed to feed their animals a year. So, when you look through their submission, they don't make that distinction, and they should. And I think, in my personal view, I think they've done a poor job in producing the submission that they did.
Interesting.
Who's the chief? Sorry.
Steve.
In terms of the science and the evidence, the literature is full of examples where it's very clear that gene editing, even with the latest methods, produces all sorts of unintended changes that you wouldn't get from conventional selective breeding. And the current literature is now not even concerned about whether unintended changes occur. It's focused on their characterization and whether there's a pattern of general occurrence. So do you accept that gene editing, according to the literature and the evidence, produces different outcomes to conventional breeding? And therefore, why do you say they should be characterized as the same?
Well, I think when you look at gene editing, you can, the first thing is that you can look at the genome after it's been gene edited. That's the first thing. The second thing, I would refer you back to the first day of oral submissions and the scientists who presented to you there.
But just clarify something. No, you're not denying that the literature is clear that gene editing produces unintended consequences that are different from conventional breeding.
Conventional, radiation mutagenesis produces changes as well. So,
Okay, so
I can understand this. I can understand the semantics of what you're trying to say.
I'm talking about the literature here.
Point of
I'm not
order,
talking about
Mr. Chair.
semantics.
Point of order, Dr. Carlos Chong.
I think we should let our submitter to present their idea and reply to the question rather than having an argument here.
I'm trying to cross-examine the
Noted.
submitter.
Thank you.
Just to clarify what they're saying.
We are running out of time, so.
So in answer to my question, I do refer you back to the scientists who spoke earlier, you know, in the first session of this hearing, and that is that both conventional agriculture or conventional breeding, radiation mutagenesis, all produce unintended consequences. I mean, you know, one's children have something like 36 mutations that neither of their parents ever had. So we've got to put these things in context. You can't just say, oh, this is slightly different, or, you know, these things are, you know, can be a little bit different. Yes, they can, but we have, with the power of genomics, to look at that.
I'll go.
But you've got to,
I'll go back to Cam. We've got a very short amount of time. We're actually over, but yeah.
Yep,
go
thank you.
quickly, Cam.
Quickly, with a question then. You say it's, this legislation is based on overseas legislation in a lot of ways, similar to Australia. How is it different or similar to Australia in your, that's important for the committee to understand?
how is it different?
Or similar, how,
Yeah.
just what do you think the committee should understand?
That's quite a broad.
Okay,
Well,
sure. How's it different?
I'll just give one point, which is in my submission, and that is that unlike Australia and unlike the current HASNO Act, there's no ability under this Act to fully deregulate an organism, which HASNO can do. If you look at Section 163, and I've suggested that Section 163 be completely deleted, and you can look at that in the written submission. But both a HASNO Act and Australia allow complete deregulation without restriction by Cabinet. The other thing is that there is no ability under this legislation to fully release an organism. So you heard from the medicines people earlier today. The situation they will have is that they will have medicines that should be fully released, but they're going to have to report back on them under this Act every year. And that's just going to be an unnecessary bureaucratic burden. And I really think you need to look at how it can be completely deregulated, or at least those organisms can be deregulated as they are in the HASNO Act.
Thank you, Dr. Rolleston.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan Mills, for joining us.